Welcome to Mama Mabel's Caregivers podcast. Today's guest is Lily Hughes, a licensed professional counselor in Michigan and South Carolina and an LPC supervisor candidate in South Carolina. Lily serves with compassion and expertise at the South Carolina Department of Mental Health, where she supports adults navigating serious and severe persistent mental illness with certifications in prolonged exposure therapy, dialectical behavior therapy, and somatic therapy. She specializes in trauma informed care, helping individuals confront and heal from the profound effects of acute, chronic, and complex trauma. Currently, she is further enhancing her practice through training in eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Lily's 25-year journey as a counselor began as a Christian recovery coach. Over the years, she has worn many hats, including ordained elder, certified marriage educator, and trusted guide for countless women and couples seeking growth and healing. At the heart of her work is a steadfast commitment to nurturing the psychological, emotional, and physiological well being of those she serves. On a personal note, Lily is the youngest of four children born to deaf parents, CODA, and has been her mother's full time caregiver since 2015. She's also a proud mother of three, grandmother of 11, and great grandmother of one. When she's not making a difference in the lives of others, Lily enjoys traveling, exploring culinary cultures, reading nonfiction, and relaxing to the smooth sounds of jazz. Hello, Miss Lily Hughes. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on as a guest on Mama Mabel's Caregivers podcast. I'm so excited to have you on today. How are you?
I am doing well, Talisa, and I thank you for having me as your guest on this very important subject matter.
Today's topic is how to identify and prevent caregiving burnout during the holiday season. And this is a topic that's really dear to my heart. As you know, I have been a caregiver, but in addition to that, I continue to meet others who are now caregivers for their loved ones. Understanding we are in the holiday season, I wanted to bring someone on who is the licensed therapist, who is knowledgeable, who has wisdom, a beautiful spirit and aura to just really help speak on this topic. So let's get into it.
All right. So, you know, let's start with burnout and caregiving, right? So, just a little bit about me, and I know you said some. Um, Taking on a family member can be a daunting task. And I think for most of us, we have great intentions in the beginning. Things go pretty smoothly. We've got our regimen and our routine set up, but after a while, and especially depending on how our elder member declines, how rapidly they may decline, or the severity of the decline, it can become stressful. And so burnout is a thing that is oftentimes associated with work, right? We don't really think of burnout as, I'm going to get tired when I'm caring for my elderly parent or my spouse, right? Or sometimes even my child. So burnout really comes from I have overtaxed myself. I've extended myself beyond my capacity, right? And I need to re-energize. Um, Burnout really resembles depression. Some of the signs of burnout resemble depression. Um, I'm irritated. I'm frustrated. I'm angry. I'm short tempered, right? I'm not sleeping well. I'm not either I'm under eating or I'm overeating, right? Um, I lack interest in things that I once did. You know, some people use negative or ineffective coping skills. I'm consuming too much alcohol. Um, I'm whatever substance of their choice, right? Um, so when we look at burnout as those those kind of like small changes to my behavior, small changes to where I once was very attentive to this loved one, I'm now dreading having to do my caregiving activities or my daily regimen. um, so that's some signs of burnout. um, I'm gonna back up a little bit and say, adding to how we got to burnout, um, we all want to do well. For me, it's my mother. I care for my mother. And we all want to be that faithful child that gives back to that parent, right? Um, but it takes a village, just like it takes a village for raising children. It takes a great support system and group of individuals, whether they're family members or not, to come alongside of us. Oftentimes in the beginning, we don't sit down and have those conversations, right? It's just, okay, who's going to take care of mom? In my case, mom chose who she wanted to live with, right? And so then it's like, okay, I had the responsibility of packing mom's house up and moving mom into me and getting her settled. And my siblings didn't help me with that. So having those conversations up front about, okay, how are we going to be able to come together and care for our elderly person? Um, when can they come and stay with another sibling, or when can you come here and visit, right? So kind of having a game plan in place, not just, sometimes we do have to just jump into it, because sometimes people decline so rapidly that we don't have time to plan. But if we do have time to plan, try to get your circle of support and kind of map out some things as much as possible in the forefront.
That's great that you said that. I like to go back to a statement about making a plan. I experienced that where I didn't have the support of, being able to talk things out with, blood relatives to specifically make a plan of how things were going to be due to just the relationship at the time. So if you're in a situation where you find that you have a loved one, and let's say maybe you're an only child, or let's say you don't have the best relationships with your siblings or cousins or whoever you talk to that would be a help, uncles, aunts, how should you move forward in that regard?
So sometimes, there are friends that we may have that are able to lend some hours a week. If we're limited on our friend circle, then we search out professionally, right?
Hmm.
We look for caregivers for hire. And I was going to mention this down the line, but the area agency on aging is a good resource, right? We look for places that can provide respite, right? So depending on the finances of the caregiver and or the elderly member, we look for places, for hire that can provide that. In-home caregiving is something that a lot of times, if an individual has insurance, um, health insurance, that their health insurance will pay some of that. If they have Medicare, Medicare will pay a certain amount of hours or days per week. So then we go outside into the professional community, and then we look for resources that way and assistance.
Okay, that's great. As it pertains to building up to this burnout, you gave like several examples of what you may be feeling, the dread. I like to add to that, but when you work full time as well, or if you have a family, and you can really feel really heavy. And I know that there are some
Mhm.
people who will go into just a state of just sleeping because they're depressed. They just can't really seem to move forward. What are some of the tools that one should incorporate to help them when they're in that stage?
I think the number one thing is ask for help. Oftentimes, and I'm coming from a lens where you've got somebody there, whether children or friends, or ask for help. Sometimes we have these unspoken expectations where, well, they should know I need help. They know I'm caring for mom. They know I'm caring for auntie. They should know I need help. Not necessarily. So it's nothing wrong with just saying, I am getting tired and I need a break, right? Um, and recognizing that in yourself. Guilt, a lot of times, comes on that same path that burnout comes on. We continue to give, and we give not out of our overflow. We don't even have a reserve sometimes when we're in burnout, and we're yet giving and we're yet giving, right? Um, so just knowing, that, okay, I'm at a place where sometimes I'm doing, and I'm going to say this, more harm than good. If I'm short tempered, if I'm not giving 100% of myself, if I am to the place where my energy level is not what it should be, then I can be more of a detriment than a help. So asking for the help, looking inward. I think for most of us, we know when we don't feel well, and we'll keep going anyway, right? And so that recognizing that I'm just not myself. I'm not only a caregiver, like you say, and in my case, I work full time, and then come home and give care. So just recognizing, asking for that help, and paying attention to what's going on inside of you.
As it pertains to that feeling of what's going on inside of you and needing help, would you say that it's best to ask for help in the very beginning, or when do you get to a point where you need to ask for help? And the reason why I'm asking that is because there are some people out here that feel that they have to be strong.
Hmm.
You have to be strong. You have to keep moving, and life happens. You just check it up, just it can just keep going. But we're human, and it's like, okay, well, I'm starting to feel some type of way. You know, when should I really start to seek help?
You should start to seek help when, as I mentioned a little earlier, when I'm more irritated and agitated than I usually am, when either I'm feeling tired all the time or I'm just not getting the sleep that I need, um, when I dread coming home to my responsibilities, or I dread having to go into the room to provide care, right? Those are all signs that I need help. Um, and then admitting to yourself, you know, so asking for help, knowing when you need help, asking for help, and then not allowing or trying to prevent the guilt from setting in, right? Because I'm supposed to be this caregiver that, is supposed to put this elderly, person's needs above my own. But as you said, we're human and we can't do it all. I know we got plenty of songs out there talking about I'm Superwoman and I can do all things. That's not true. We're not. And multitasking just adds to the burnout, you know, juggling things around, that adds to the burnout. So the minute that you recognize something is off about you, that's gonna um take for the individual to really be paying attention to themselves, right? Not just doing, going without recognizing I am just not the same person that I normally am. So, attention to ourselves, just like we're attentive and paying attention to our elderly family member whomever we're taking care of, we in fact need to turn that on ourselves and give ourselves that attentiveness, right? Just like when we're hungry, when we're thirsty, we attend to those needs. When I'm feeling angry, because now all of this responsibility is lying with me, and anger does sometimes go with caregiving, right? Um, it's not always as sweet as people make it out to be. There are some not so pleasant and pretty sides to caregiving, and that depends on, like I said, the level of care that you're giving, the the mental or the cognitive capacities or physical capacities of the elder. The more they lack, the more we have to give.
That's really deep. And it's something that you said that really resonated with me is making sure that you pay attention to yourself, just like you do when it's time to eat, when you're hungry or when you're thirsty, etc. When a person is a caregiver, it's like you're accepting something that's new. And it's like, okay, well, I got this. I'm going to get involved. I'll handle this. I'll figure this out. And when you get into that state, the, the mindset can easily be such as mine. Okay, well, I'm just whatever I need to do, I'll do it. So yes, I'm going through what I'm now calling a new normal, learning a new normal. But within that, it's very easy to get lost because you're experiencing a lot, and you may have reactions to things. You may start to feel burnout, but because you're not paying attention to yourself, you're paying attention more so to your loved one that you're providing care for, you can end up experiencing burnout without really knowing it until you're like at the wit's end.
Yeah, so I think when we ignore, it lends to the problem. So most of us are of an age, especially if we're in a caregiver role, that we've had some level of responsibility on whatever level. Whether, I've had a child or I've taken care of somebody else's child, or I have a lot of responsibility at work, or most of us have had some level of responsibility where we have either taught ourselves or been trained to um, pay attention to detail and signs. We haven't talked about this yet, but that's where boundaries come in at, right? When I'm giving of myself unrelentlessly, regardless of what it is, we're talking about caregiving, but it could be my day job, it could be to my children, it could be in the community. When I'm just giving, my abundance runs out, especially if I'm not replenishing myself. So if I'm just giving out, there's going to come a point where I don't have the capacity to give anymore. Why? Because I've given out all that I have. And so the self care gives us time to replenish ourselves, right? And if we're not replenishing ourselves, the body is going to let us know. If we're not paying attention enough to ourselves, our body will let us know. Our body will shut down on us. Our body will get sick. We will become so fatigued that, we need somebody caring for us for a time. So the body will let us know. If you're not picking up on it yourself, the body is only going to go so far, and it's going to start giving you signs that I'm not okay, right? Um, Sickness is oftentimes associated with caregiving. I know you've heard probably statistics that have said most caregivers pass away in a certain amount of time after their loved one passes away, right? That is an example of those caregivers that just have just nonstop, ongoing, maybe had little to no help. And they just kept giving and doing, much of which, you know, they may have not could got out of it. They may have not did had the help. However, they kept doing it and giving until their bodies gave out. So the body will always let us know, right? And mind, body work together, right? So it's going to let me know whether mentally, right? I'm going to start having some symptoms mentally, and that's what we talked about earlier, um, signs of depression, the lack of energy, the lack of sleep, or too much sleep, or the body, physical body itself will start to let us know, right? My immune system is weakening. I'm getting more sick than I normally am. I'm overeating, which is causing some issues, or undereating, which is causing some issues. So the body, there's a book out there that says the body keeps the score, but the body will tell us, right? The body and the mind will tell us when we are on overload.
Wow, thank you so much. That's a lot of just great information. So many just great golden nuggets of wisdom there. I would like to go back to boundaries. Thinking about boundaries when you're a caregiver, how do you, as a caregiver that's taking on a new norm, so to speak, how do you go about setting boundaries within that space and also getting to a place within yourself that you know that it's okay to do so?
I think the probably the most important thing to note about boundaries is boundaries are for ourselves. It's for us. A lot of people talk about boundaries and I'm gonna develop a boundary and they're wanting somebody else to not do something. But a boundary is for me to stay within the realms of what I've established as healthy, right, for me, or doable for me. So I'm gonna give you an example of my journey in caregiving. So um, I have always been a person that when I come home from work, I need about 15 minutes, 10, 15 minutes, right? To just kind of unwind, change my clothes, settle in. My mom likes to engage as soon as I come in the door, right? So, probably about, it took me probably about 4 years to restructure her thinking, because I would tell her like, okay, wait a minute, I'll get back with you because obviously, everything is an emergency. Everything is, I need it now, right now, when it isn't. So because that was already a boundary I had established for myself many years ago, um, I just slowly got her acclimated to how I do things in my life, in my world, right? So at first she was very resistant, but I would just, are you okay? I would always, come in and it's whatever it is. I can't open, I can't get this open, or can you get this from the top of the closet, or. And so I would just say, wait a minute, you know, give me 15 minutes. And she would say, okay. There were some times when she would knock on my door, on my room door, my bedroom door, and I'd be like, wait a minute. So I really had to teach her that this is a non-negotiable. Like I just need this time. But I always, evaluate whether there's something that really needs my attention right now or it can wait, right? So that's the boundary I set. Imagine what that would look like if I had not established that and reinforced it in my home. I would be coming in from work, and depending on how long the commute is, and sometimes commutes are stressful. and going right into caregiving, not having any kind of time to just woosah for a minute, right, and collect myself and gather myself before I go into my next duty. So boundaries, once again, they're for us. They're to keep us in a space and parameter where I can operate to my at my fullest potential so that I can give this person that I'm caring for my fullest attention, right? Um, Boundaries are to manage our actions, right? They're to help us to manage them, be able to give out of our overflow and not out of depletion, which causes the burnout. Um, and it's not for the other person. And I think that's the most important thing to know. It's not for, this is a boundary I set, you can't do this. No, the boundary is for us, right? So that's just one example of a boundary. I probably got some more that I've had to have with my mom, but that's one example. And interesting enough, that is a boundary that wasn't just for my mom. That was a boundary I set when my children were young, right? So if we examine ourselves, we just happen to be in a caregiver's role, but we're the same individual. So as much as we possibly can, stay true to our personality, our demeanors, or, whatever we've got going on, and just incorporate that elder member, right, as we provide care for them. Sometimes not boundary, excuse me, sometimes burnout can come from I'm attempting to be something or someone that I'm not, naturally, that I'm not, right? If we're not naturally a nurturing person, it's going to be difficult for me to nurture my elder member. If I'm not a person that really likes physical touch, and that elder member needs that physical touch, I'm a struggle in that area, right? And I may provide it, but it's gonna take something away from me. Why? Because that's not naturally how I am. So it's important to stay true to ourselves and not, change who we are in order to provide adequate care for our loved ones.
Beautifully said. Podcast family, this is amazing because when I went through the caregiver process for the first time at the age of 33, 34, I didn't know that I needed therapy. I didn't know that I needed to have boundaries. I just dove straight in, and within this process of being a caregiver, I was alone in that process. And just thinking about everything and transitions that I went through and even dealing with some burnout, etc., it just would have been great if I had a known some of the things that Lily is sharing right now. This is also a reason why I wanted to have Lily on the podcast, because there's a really big component to this that I believe is missed a lot. And that component is therapy. When you have a therapist that you can speak to, that you go to, these are some of the topics that you're able to talk about. And some of these topics will actually help you, and the tools given will help you during your caregiving process as a caregiver. So this is why it's important. I hear a lot within the Black and Brown. I am an Afro Latina, Afro Mexicana. I do come from two cultures, Black and Brown, and we're not big on therapy. I like to call like the millennials and some of the Gen Xers. I call us the ones who go. I call us the first generation healers, because we're the very first ones, or have been the first ones within our family, within our bloodline, to go and seek therapy. And within that, culturally speaking, in the past that's been something that's been taboo. You only go if you're crazy. And, the mindset is, oh, well, I'm not crazy. So, I don't need to go. But it's deeper than that. Our brains are so complicated that we have specialists here in terms of like even therapists that are able to help us process things and work through life's complications, some of the most complicated areas in life. Being able to have someone to talk to express how you're feeling and what you're going through, especially as it pertains to becoming a caregiver for the first time, or even if it's the second or third time, because each case is different, is something that will really help you. It'll help your mental health. It'll help your overall well-being. And if I had known at the time that I should have been going to therapy at the very beginning, as soon as I found out about my mother's diagnosis, because again, I didn't have an opportunity to cry or process stage 1, 2, or 3. It was mama has stage 4 breast cancer. And then in my mind, it was, I gotta go mode. And then in that mindset, I was trying to fix everything. What I really needed was to be in therapy at that time, to have someone to talk to really be able to express how I felt, to gain tools, to learn about boundaries, to learn about burnout. And because I didn't have that, and I genuinely did not know to go to therapy, I'm bringing a therapist on, a very well rounded, knowledgeable therapist on for you. Because I believe in giving. I believe that the things that have happened to me, life experiences with me and even other people, that no one is unique to having life happen. And there are two kind of people, in my opinion, in this world. You have that one person who experiences life in different situations, and they'll see someone else and they'll say, oh, well, I had to figure that out on my own. Your turn, let them figure it out, it's life. And then you have that other person that says, you know what, I went through this experience and I learned this after the fact. What can I do to help others? Because I understand that I'm not the only person who has ever walked the path of caregiving. So that's something that's really important to me. We talked about setting boundaries. We talked about uh, coming up with the game plan at the very beginning. And some of the key things I took away from that is, if you're able, if you have a relationship with, let's say, your siblings or cousins, aunt, uncles, whoever it is that's in your world that cares about your loved one, it's important to come together and make a game plan. But if you don't, it's okay to venture outside of that and maybe, bring in friends. And then also look into your insurance options, your parents' insurance options, or your loved one's insurance options, and see what kind of help that you can get from that. Bring in some professionals. And then we also talked about boundaries. That's something that's huge because we all need them during every phase of life that we're in. Continuing our conversation about going to therapy, I would like to just kind of expound on that a bit more and just the importance of it. Lily, can you go into detail, share your thoughts on that?
So therapy is a great option. Um, a lot of times there is a little pushback from us as individuals to go to therapy, depending on what generation you fall into, right? My generation was, everything that go on in this house, stay in this house, and we don't seek outside help or we don't tell our business, right? That is a mindset that for the generation under me was passed down as well, right? So I would encourage therapy. I would encourage as early as possible. The beauty of COVID brought telehealth, right? So sometimes, there'll be like, I'm already stretched for time, I don't have a lot of it. You can find a telehealth therapist. Psychology Today, you can find therapists on there that provide telehealth services, and you never have to leave your home, right? You can do it and go out inside and do it in the car if you don't want your loved one to hear. right? But therapy is a great option. Unfortunately, in the Black and Brown community, there are not a lot of us as therapists, right? There are some of us, but there are not a lot of us. And so, if that matters to you, I would encourage you to seek a Black and Brown or person of color therapist out. In addition, there are not a lot of male therapists. So I think it's important that men have men to talk to. So if therapy is not on your radar or it's not something you want to do, another great way to tap into support is through support groups, right? They have support groups for caregivers. Earlier, I mentioned Area Agency on Aging. If you're AARP member, AARP has great resources and supports for caregivers. We talked about the insurances, but organizations that's related to the illness that your loved one may have. For me, is Dementia and Alzheimer's organization, right? Um, there's another one that's called the National Alliance for Caregiving, right? And then the last one I put down was Family Caregiver Alliance. So if you kind of got cold feet about seeing a therapist, there are some other ways to get support from professionals, and you don't feel like you're on the couch talking about your issues. But if you're open to therapy, like I said, Psychology Today is a great way to look and find some therapists, depending on your insurance is probably, where you would go. So you could start with your insurance company to see who's a network for you. I personally, I stay in Department of Mental Health because I want to offer top-notch service to people that's less fortunate. So a lot of people say, why haven't you went into private practice? Private practice was never my desire. I want to help the less fortunate. I want to help those that maybe don't have the insurance to seek, a private practice counselor, right? So I keep myself in a area where I can help those that's less fortunate than us. But therapy it not only gives you a way to kind of get some things out of you, but it does give you a way to get those added tools and strategies to use to cope with the stress that comes along with caregiving, right? Um, I want to also talk about some other ways of prevention, right? So we're talking about burnout, right? So self-care, number one. That's like top of my list. And self-care for me could look like going to get a pedicure, right? Um, another boundary that I have placed in my life, and it was before caregiving, is every quarter I try to take some time off, right? So I know that's not feasible for everybody, but it could be a staycation. It doesn't mean that you gotta get out, and go out of town or somewhere. You could be at home with your loved one, if you're working full time, or you may want to extend on a holiday weekend and take an extra day off, so you got a 4-day weekend. um, so making sure you get that self-care in, whatever that looks like for you. um, I have 4 other siblings. One of my siblings, my second oldest sister, my mom probably spends more time, well, not probably, she does. She spends more time with her than any of my other siblings. So she normally goes to my sister, and fortunately, she's about 4 hours away from us. So she goes to her probably twice a year. And when she goes to her, we've already kind of planned out how long she'll be there, right? Last year or this year, I went on a cruise and my mom stayed with my sister, I think about 3 months, right? 2 or 3 months. It gave me a long break. Um, and so self care, self care, self care. And everybody's self care looks different. Um, something that I didn't mention earlier was know your personality. I'm introverted, right? So giving already in and of itself is taxing for me even prior to becoming a caregiver. So it's really important that I just have downtime. I may not even be doing anything, if my mom is settled, her needs are met. Fortunately for me, my mom turns 90 next month. And my mom can care for herself pretty much. She has Alzheimer's and dementia, so the memory and the cognitive decline is there, but she can still do her daily living activities. She can bathe herself, clothe herself, feed herself, cook if she wanted to. We try to keep that at a minimum, though. But she can do those things. So my situation may be a little bit different from other people. Sometimes our loved ones, they need 100% support where they can do nothing for themselves, and so once that loved one is taken care of and they're settled, take that time to go sit down, do nothing, watch a comedy, something to laugh about. Because oftentimes caregiving, or sometimes I should say, caregiving can be so challenging, we just want to ball up and cry somewhere. That's fine too. Something to get it out of us, right? Exercise. Exercise is a great way to relieve the stress, right? So whether that's walking, whether that's on the treadmill, for me, I tapped into water aerobics, just some form of burning off that stress, right? Um, Making sure that our sleep is what it needs to be, right? Um, I remember my family is a family that we care for our elderly. So my mother cared for her mother until she passed. My oldest sister cared for a great aunt who had no children. So we tend to care for our elderly instead of placing them in nursing homes. Now, I'm not knocking that because sometimes that's what we have to do, right? So kind of ask yourself, what would make this situation a little lighter for me? And sit down and list that, right? Some things are very simplistic. We make them complex, but some things are very simplistic. You know, why am I feeling the way that I feel? Why am I feeling sad? Why am I feeling angry? Sit down and list what leads to that, what triggers that, and that's probably most likely why you're feeling that way, right? So do all the prevention you can. We're trying to minimize burnout. It's not to say that we won't get to burnout, right? But if we recognize that we're getting burned out, let's put some self-care strategies in place. Let's seek some therapy. Let's seek some support groups if therapy is not an option or you don't necessarily want therapy. Let's seek some support groups. Let's create those boundaries and those routines. Routines are really helpful when we are providing a service to other people, right? Routine is like schedule. I remember when my mom first came with me, my mom liked good soul food and she wanted the collard greens and the fried chicken and all that. Well, you know what? Lily don't cook like that through the week. Lily will give you that maybe on the weekend and that maybe is there. But Lily don't cook like that through the week. So, she started looking at me like, girl, what's wrong with you? Like I didn't raise you and teach you like this, but that's just me. Can you imagine working a full-time job and coming home and cleaning greens? Yeah. So, let's stay true to ourselves. I personally believe that whatever situation we're in and our caregiving responsibilities, if we take the time to look inward and fulfill the needs of ourselves, then we'll have the capacity to give our loved one what they need, right? And when we don't have that capacity, then that's when we want to rally some support, right? Whether it's family, friends, agencies, therapists.
That is awesome. Podcast family, what I'm going to do, the resources that Lily mentioned, I will make sure to have the websites listed in the description to everything that she mentioned. And as well, Lily also has contact information to get in touch with her if you live in the state of South Carolina or in the state of Michigan. And Lily, what's your contact information?
I am old school, so I don't do the social media platforms and stuff like that. So MHTSC810 at Gmail.
Okay, awesome. And podcast family, what I will do is I will also list Lily Hughes' contact information, her email address in the description. So if you are in the state of South Carolina or in the state of Michigan and you are seeking a therapist, Lily is here. Maybe she can help with that.
Yeah, and if I could add to Lisa, even if I can't take you on as a client, I can provide you resources to a therapist, especially if you're a person of color and you're looking for a therapist of color. So, yeah, you can email me and just say, hey, I'm looking for a therapist, and tell me the area in which you live in, whether in South Carolina or Michigan.
Yes, that's great. I will share this with the podcast family as well. When I first started out with therapy, and you all know my story, after my mother passed is when I ended up receiving therapy, and it was because I literally felt like I was about to have a breakdown. I had built my mother a house as a gift for her. She passed before it was finished. I had one of her siblings that was my mom wasn't even gone for 7 days, and she was saying that she, was going to move into my house. Like, and I was like, where is the compassion, the love, the care, etc. For me? And it just got to a point where I literally felt like I was about to have a breakdown. So I needed to see a therapist. That's when it hit me. I needed to see a therapist. And the first therapist that I had was a woman of color, was a Black woman. That was because I felt like being a person of color, in the beginning, I felt like, the only person that probably would understand me is another person of color, another Black woman, or in my case, a Mexican, or I say Mexican because I'm Mexican, but, another Latina, como yo, like me, because they could understand my culture better than not. And so that's how I got in and I started. And then eventually I ended up obtaining another therapist that is Caucasian, and I love her to pieces. She works well for me, great. But I would not have made it to her if I didn't begin on my journey. And that was with first being comfortable enough to talk with someone and realizing that I needed a person that looked like me. That made me feel comfortable to just begin my journey. So, with that said, thank you so much, Lily, for agreeing to come on. And, I really appreciate you and the words of wisdom that you shared with the podcast family on today. And yeah, I look forward to sharing this with the world. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Talisa, and thank you for your podcast. Very much needed. Another resource for caregivers to be able to tap into. So thank you.